Daniel was 16 years old, a tall but gentle boy who worked after school at a small grocery store near his neighborhood. His job was simple. He packed items, helped customers, and carried bags when someone needed an extra hand. He did not earn much, but the job gave him a sense of responsibility and also helped his mother with small expenses at home. Most days were ordinary. He would smile politely at customers, bag groceries carefully, and sweep the floors when the shop was quiet. One rainy afternoon, the store was not too busy. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the room. People hurried in with umbrellas, bought their things quickly, and rushed back out to avoid the storm. Daniel stood near the counter waiting for the next customer. That was when he noticed an elderly man slowly making his way to the register. The man looked to be in his late 70s. His shoulders were slightly bent, and his steps were careful, as though each movement took effort. He wore a long coat that seemed a little too big for his thin frame, and carried a small umbrella dripping water onto the floor. His basket was filled with bread, milk, apples, and a few cans of soup. Nothing unusual, yet something about the way he handled the basket caught Daniel's attention. His hands shook slightly as he placed the items on the counter, and his breathing seemed heavy as if the short walk around the store had already tired him. Daniel felt an instinctive concern. He quietly helped the cashier pack the groceries into bags and then looked at the man. The bags were not too heavy, but for someone his age, carrying them in the rain could be a real challenge. Daniel stepped forward and asked with a polite voice if he could carry them home for him. At first, the elderly man looked surprised. His eyes, pale yet kind, studied Daniel for a moment. Then a gentle smile appeared. He nodded slowly and thanked him in a soft tone. Daniel picked up the bags, holding them carefully so nothing would break, and opened the door for the man. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the streets outside glistened under the dim light of the lamps. They began walking side by side. The old man walked slowly, and Daniel adjusted his pace to match. At first, neither spoke. Only the sound of shoes splashing lightly on the wet ground could be heard. But after a short while, the man glanced at Daniel and asked his name. "Daniel," he replied. "I work part-time at the store." The man nodded as though he was not only hearing the name but remembering it carefully. He introduced himself as Mr. Harris. His voice was calm, with the kind of tone that made a listener want to lean closer. Daniel noticed that even though his steps were unsteady, there was dignity in the way he carried himself. As they continued walking, Mr. Harris asked simple questions. He wanted to know what grade Daniel was in, what subjects he liked, and what dreams he carried for the future. Daniel, who was usually shy around older people, found himself answering openly. He told Mr. Harris that he liked drawing, that he hoped to study architecture one day, and that he worked at the store to save a little money for college. To his surprise, Mr. Harris listened with genuine interest. He did not interrupt. He did not rush the conversation. He simply listened as though Daniel's words truly mattered. The walk was not long, but for Daniel it felt meaningful. He had helped customers many times before, yet this moment felt different. Perhaps it was the way Mr. Harris looked at him, with appreciation, or the way the rain gave the street a quiet, reflective mood. Whatever the reason, Daniel sensed there was more to this meeting than just carrying groceries. When they reached a small street lined with older houses, Mr. Harris stopped in front of a modest home with a white fence. The paint on the fence was chipped in places, but the garden behind it was tidy, with flowers blooming even in the rain. He thanked Daniel once again and offered him shelter from the drizzle inside the house until the rain passed. Daniel hesitated for a moment. He had not planned to enter a stranger's home, but something about Mr. Harris's kind expression made him feel safe. He agreed politely, and they stepped inside. The home was warm and carried a faint smell of tea and old books. The furniture was simple, yet there was a sense of history in every corner. Photographs hung on the walls, some black and white, others faded with time. A wooden bookshelf stood near the living room window, filled with thick novels and worn journals. On a table rested a guitar, dusty yet carefully placed as though it had once been loved dearly. Daniel placed the grocery bags on the kitchen counter as Mr. Harris put away his umbrella. The man thanked him again, not once, but twice, as though the simple act of help meant more to him than Daniel could understand. Sitting for a moment in that house, Daniel felt something stir within him. He realized that people carried entire lives behind them, stories that could not be seen at first glance. Mr. Harris might have looked like an ordinary old man struggling with groceries, but there was clearly more to him. Before leaving, Daniel promised he would check on him again after work whenever Mr. Harris needed help. The man's eyes lit up, and he nodded with quiet gratitude. As Daniel walked back to the store, the rain easing into a soft mist, he felt different from when he had first left. The simple choice to help had opened a small door, and he sensed there was something waiting on the other side, something important that he was about to discover. That rainy afternoon did not just end with the delivery of groceries. It was the beginning of a story Daniel would never forget. The next day after school, Daniel returned to his part-time job at the grocery store. The rain had passed, leaving the streets fresh and bright under the afternoon sun. As he arranged fruits on the shelf, his thoughts kept returning to Mr. Harris. The old man's kind eyes and the quiet warmth of his home stayed in his mind. Daniel wondered if he would see him again. Not long after, as Daniel was stacking apples into neat rows, he noticed Mr. Harris entering the store once more. He walked slowly, leaning on his cane, but his face brightened when he spotted Daniel. It was a small smile, the kind that made Daniel feel remembered. "Good afternoon, Daniel," Mr. Harris greeted gently. Daniel was surprised. Most customers never remembered his name, yet Mr. Harris spoke it as though it was important. Daniel quickly went to help him with his basket. Together they moved through the aisles, placing bread, eggs, and tea inside. The walk through the store felt less like shopping and more like a friendly stroll. When they reached the counter, Daniel carried the bags again without being asked. Mr. Harris did not protest. Instead, he nodded as if he was glad to share the walk with someone. As they stepped onto the quiet street, Mr. Harris began speaking in a calm tone. "You said yesterday you like drawing. What do you usually draw?" Daniel looked down at the wet pavement and smiled shyly. "Mostly houses, buildings. I like imagining what I would design if I became an architect one day." Mr. Harris listened carefully. "That is a fine dream. Buildings are more than walls and roofs. They hold memories, laughter, and families. You are not just building stone. You are shaping lives." The words surprised Daniel. He had never thought about it that way. Teachers often told him architecture was about lines, angles, and designs. Yet Mr. Harris spoke of it as something alive. They walked a little further. Birds chirped from the trees, and the smell of damp earth rose after the rain. Daniel felt comfortable enough to share more. "Sometimes I feel it is impossible. College is expensive. My mother works hard, but we do not have much money. I do this job to help, but it will never be enough." Mr. Harris looked at him kindly. "Do not let doubt stop you, Daniel. Many of the greatest journeys begin with little. Effort, patience, and faith can take you further than money alone." The sincerity in his voice made Daniel feel lighter. For a boy used to carrying his worries quietly, these words felt like a gentle hand lifting part of the weight. When they reached the white fence of Mr. Harris's home, the elderly man invited Daniel inside once again. Daniel followed, placing the groceries on the kitchen table. This time, Mr. Harris brewed tea and poured 2 cups, one for himself and one for Daniel. The warm steam filled the small room, mixing with the smell of fresh bread. They sat by the window, and sunlight streamed in, making the dust in the air sparkle like tiny stars. Mr. Harris asked Daniel about his family, and Daniel spoke about his mother who worked long hours, and his little sister who was only 8 and loved to read fairy tales. "And your father?" Mr. Harris asked gently. Daniel's eyes lowered. "He left when I was young. It has always been just my mother, my sister, and me." Mr. Harris gave a small nod. He did not press further, only offering a look of understanding. That silence, kind and patient, felt like a comfort to Daniel. After a few moments, Mr. Harris began sharing stories of his own youth. He told Daniel how he once lived in a busy city, how he worked as a teacher, and how he loved music. He pointed to the guitar in the corner. "I used to play that every evening. Music filled the house when my children were young." Daniel glanced at the guitar, its strings slightly rusty but still intact. He imagined Mr. Harris as a younger man, sitting in that very room, playing songs while his family laughed around him. The image made him realize that this man had lived a life full of experiences. The conversation drifted between past and present, between questions and laughter. Daniel found himself speaking more than he usually did with anyone outside his family. Mr. Harris had a way of listening that made even small words feel valuable. Time passed quickly, and soon Daniel noticed the sun dipping lower in the sky. He stood reluctantly, knowing he had to return home. Mr. Harris walked him to the door and thanked him once again. As Daniel stepped outside, Mr. Harris called after him, "Remember, Daniel, every dream begins with one step. Do not be afraid to take it." Daniel carried those words with him as he walked back through the quiet street. Something about the way Mr. Harris spoke made Daniel feel as though he was more than just a boy with a part-time job. He felt seen, encouraged, and respected in a way he had not felt in a long time. That night, Daniel lay in bed thinking about the conversation. He thought about architecture, about his mother's hard work, about his sisters, laughter, and about the guitar in Mr. Harris's house. For the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, his dream was not too far away. What had begun as a simple act of kindness was slowly turning into something greater. Daniel was starting to realize that his walks with Mr. Harris were not only about carrying groceries. They were about carrying stories, lessons, and hope. The gentle conversations between the teenager and the elderly man were becoming threads weaving a bond that neither had expected. And with each passing day, Daniel felt more certain that meeting Mr. Harris was not a coincidence. It was the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives. The days turned into a quiet routine. Daniel went to school in the morning, worked at the grocery store in the afternoon, and often helped Mr. Harris in the evenings. What had started as a single act of kindness now became a habit. Each time Mr. Harris came to the store, Daniel was there to carry his groceries and walk him home. And almost every time, Daniel ended up staying for tea or a short chat. Daniel found himself looking forward to those visits. School was tiring, and the grocery store was repetitive, but the walks with Mr. Harris felt different. They were calm, meaningful, and full of small surprises. With each meeting, Daniel saw a little more of who Mr. Harris truly was. One afternoon, after they returned to the little house with the white fence, Mr. Harris asked Daniel to help place some boxes in the living room. The boxes were filled with old photo albums, letters, and souvenirs from years past. Dust clung to the covers, and the paper smelled faintly of time. Curiosity sparked in Daniel's eyes. He carefully opened one album and saw black and white photographs of a young man in uniform. The young man stood proudly with his fellow soldiers, smiling despite the seriousness of the moment. On another page, there was a picture of the same man holding a guitar, surrounded by friends. Daniel looked up at Mr. Harris, who was watching quietly from his chair. "Is this you?" Daniel asked. Mr. Harris gave a gentle nod. Yes, that was me many years ago. I served during difficult times and later I taught music to children. Life was full of journeys then. Daniel studied the photographs again. Was hard to imagine that the frail old man before him had once been full of such energy, traveling, teaching, and standing strong in uniform. As Daniel turned the pages, he came across family portraits. A smiling woman with kind eyes stood beside Mr. Harris in one picture. 2 children, a boy and a girl, held their parents' hands. The picture was filled with happiness, as if the family had everything they needed in that moment. "Your family," Daniel said softly. "Yes," Mr. Harris replied with a faraway look in his eyes. "My wife was the light of my life. She loved music as much as I did. And those are my children. They grew up, started their own lives, and moved far away." His voice softened, and Daniel noticed a hint of loneliness hidden beneath his words. Daniel did not ask further. He understood that some stories carried both joy and sadness. Instead, he listened quietly as Mr. Harris spoke. Later, Mr. Harris guided Daniel to the bookshelf near the window. He picked out a thick-worn book and handed it to him. "This was my favorite when I was young," he said. "I read it many times, and every time it taught me something new." Daniel ran his fingers across the faded cover and opened it carefully. Inside, the pages were full of underlined passages and notes written in neat handwriting. It was clear that the book had been a trusted companion for many years. "Books, music, and memories," Mr. Harris said with a faint smile. "They are the treasures of a lifetime." Daniel felt a deep respect for the man. He realized that Mr. Harris was not just an elderly customer. He was a person who had lived through history, who had built a family, shared music, taught students, and carried memories that filled every corner of his home. After finishing the tea, Daniel helped place the boxes back in order. As he worked, he noticed a guitar resting near the wall. The strings were dusty, but the wood still shone under the light. Daniel pointed at it. "Do you still play?" Mr. Harris chuckled softly. "Not as often as I once did. My fingers are not as strong now. But sometimes I strum a little to remember the old days." "Will you play for me sometime?" Daniel asked eagerly. Mr. Harris's eyes warmed at the request. "Perhaps. Music is best when shared, and it has been a long time since I played for someone." That evening, as Daniel left the house, the images of the photographs stayed in his mind. He thought of the young soldier, the smiling family, and the teacher with his guitar. It felt like he had stepped into a hidden world, one that most people would never see if they only passed Mr. Harris on the street. Walking home, Daniel reflected on how easily people judged others by appearances. To many, Mr. Harris was just an old man who needed help carrying groceries. But behind that appearance was a life full of stories, adventures, love, and lessons. Daniel realized how much history and wisdom could be lost if no one took the time to listen. That night, Daniel sat at his desk and began sketching. He drew a small house with a white fence, flowers blooming in the garden, and a window glowing with warm light. Inside the window, he imagined Mr. Harris sitting with his guitar, smiling gently as though the music never truly left him. The drawing made Daniel feel connected, not just to his dream of architecture, but also to the idea of building spaces filled with meaning. The next day, Daniel showed the drawing to Mr. Harris. The old man's eyes softened as he looked at it. "You have talent, Daniel," he said sincerely. "This is more than lines on paper. You captured a feeling. Never let go of that gift." Hearing those words gave Daniel a sense of pride he rarely felt. He realized that encouragement, even from someone outside his family, could ignite a stronger belief in himself. From then on, each visit to Mr. Harris's home was not only about groceries or tea, it was about discovery. Daniel learned pieces of history, listened to stories of travel, and even picked up lessons about life and patience. In return, Daniel shared his youthful energy, his drawings, and his laughter. Slowly, the bond between the two grew stronger. And while Daniel thought he was simply helping an elderly man, he was beginning to see that Mr. Harris was also helping him, teaching him to look deeper, to dream bigger, and to understand that behind every quiet smile there was a world of untold stories. The bond between Daniel and Mr. Harris grew stronger with each passing week. The boy who once saw the grocery store as nothing more than a dull part-time job now found meaning in the quiet walks and warm conversations. Every visit opened another page of Mr. Harris's life, and Daniel felt as if he was discovering a hidden storybook filled with lessons. One cool Saturday afternoon, Daniel arrived at the little house with the white fence. The garden was peaceful, with autumn leaves scattered across the ground. Mr. Harris welcomed him inside with a smile and asked for a little help in the attic. Daniel followed him up the narrow stairs. The attic was filled with boxes, trunks, and items that carried the weight of years. Dust floated in the air as sunlight streamed through a small window. Mr. Harris pointed to a trunk near the corner. "I have not opened this in a long time," he said softly. Together they lifted the lid. Inside were neatly folded uniforms, old letters tied with ribbon, and medals resting in a small wooden box. Daniel's eyes widened. He carefully picked up one medal and turned it in his hand. The medal was heavy, shining faintly even after so many years. "You were a soldier," Daniel whispered. Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "Yes, during difficult times I served. Those medals are not just for bravery. They are reminders of sacrifice, of friends who never came back." His voice carried both pride and sorrow. Daniel listened with respect. For the first time, he understood that the man he had been helping with groceries had once stood strong in uniform, facing challenges far greater than the weight of shopping bags. Mr. Harris pulled out a letter from the trunk and handed it to Daniel. The paper was yellowed, but the handwriting was clear. "This was from my wife during the time I was away. She wrote to me every week, and those words gave me strength." Daniel read a few lines quietly. The letter spoke of hope, love, and waiting for his safe return. He could almost feel the emotion written between the lines. He handed it back carefully, as though holding something precious. They spent the afternoon looking through the trunk. There were photographs of Mr. Harris with his fellow soldiers, smiling despite the hardships. There were journals filled with notes about places he had seen and people he had met. Each item carried a memory, and each memory revealed another piece of who Mr. Harris had been. After closing the trunk, they returned downstairs. Mr. Harris sat in his chair by the window, looking thoughtful. Daniel sat opposite him, waiting silently, knowing the man had more to share. "When I came back," Mr. Harris began, "life changed. I married my wife, and together we built a family. She was my strength, my music, my home. We had 2 children, and our house was always filled with laughter. But life moves fast, Daniel. My wife passed away many years ago, and my children built their lives in other places. I do not blame them. Everyone must follow their own path. But sometimes, the house feels too quiet." Daniel's heart tightened. He realized that beneath the stories and the gentle smile, there was also loneliness. Yet Mr. Harris spoke with grace, never with bitterness. "I used to play my guitar every evening," Mr. Harris continued. "Music filled the rooms. But after she was gone, I played less and less. Silence took her place." Daniel looked at the guitar resting against the wall. He wanted to hear it come alive again. "Maybe you could teach me," he suggested. "I do not know much about music, but I would like to learn." A slow smile spread across Mr. Harris's face. "Perhaps I will. Music should not stay silent, forever." The conversation shifted, and Mr. Harris asked Daniel more about his life. Daniel spoke about his mother working late hours, his little sister's love for stories, and his own dream of becoming an architect. Mr. Harris listened closely, nodding with encouragement. "Dreams are like seeds," Mr. Harris said. "They need patience and care. Some take time to grow, but if you keep tending to them, they will bloom." Those words stayed with Daniel. He had always thought of his dream as something distant, almost impossible. But hearing them described as seeds made him believe that even small steps mattered. Before Daniel left that evening, Mr. Harris placed a small journal in his hands. The cover was worn, and the pages inside were filled with sketches, notes, and thoughts written many years ago. "This was mine," Mr. Harris explained. "I kept it during my travels. Sometimes when you cannot speak your dreams, you must write them. Perhaps you can use it for your own drawings." Daniel held the journal tightly. He felt honored to receive something so personal. "Thank you, sir. I will take care of it." Walking home that evening, Daniel's thoughts were full. He replayed the stories of medals, letters, and music. He imagined the young soldier, the devoted husband, the loving father. And then he thought of the quiet man sitting alone in the house now. The contrast was powerful. Daniel realized something important. Mr. Harris was not just sharing his past, he was giving Daniel lessons for the future. Lessons about courage, love, patience, and the importance of cherishing the people around you. That night, Daniel opened the journal again. He turned to a blank page and began to draw. His pencil moved across the paper, sketching not only houses but also shapes inspired by the stories he had heard. He drew a building with wide windows that let in light, a roof shaped like open arms, and walls that seemed to hold both strength and comfort. It was not just a design. It was a vision of what he wanted to create one day. For Daniel, helping Mr. Harris with groceries had opened the door to an entire world, a world of history, music, and wisdom. And now, with each story revealed, Daniel felt that he too was being shaped. He was not only carrying bags, he was carrying lessons that would guide him through life. The days of autumn slowly passed, and Daniel's visits to Mr. Harris became part of his life. It was no longer just about carrying groceries from the store. It was about sitting together over tea, sharing stories, and learning from each other. Both of them seemed to find something in these moments that they had been missing. For Daniel, it was guidance and encouragement. At home, his mother worked long hours, and though she loved him deeply, she was often tired. His little sister filled the house with laughter, but she was too young to understand his worries about the future. With Mr. Harris, Daniel found someone who listened patiently, someone who believed in his dreams even when he doubted himself. For Mr. Harris, it was companionship. His house had grown quiet over the years. The walls still held memories, but the laughter of his wife and children had faded into the past. Daniel's visits brought warmth back into his days. The young boy's presence filled the silence with life, and his questions reminded Mr. Harris of the curiosity he once saw in his own children. One chilly evening, Daniel arrived with his school, bag still slung over his shoulder. He had come straight from class, eager to show Mr. Harris something he had drawn. He pulled out a sheet of paper, a sketch of a large building with tall windows and open courtyards. "It is beautiful," Mr. Harris said, holding the drawing carefully. "What inspired this?" "I thought about what you said," Daniel answered, "about how buildings hold memories and lives. I wanted to design something that feels open and welcoming, like a place where people can gather and never feel lonely." Mr. Harris smiled with pride. "You understand something that takes others years to learn. Architecture is not just lines and shapes. It is about people. It is about the heart inside the walls." Hearing this made Daniel glow with confidence. He tucked the paper back into his bag but the words stayed with him. Later that evening, Daniel noticed the guitar leaning against the wall again. He remembered his earlier request. "Will you play for me now?" he asked gently. Mr. Harris paused, looking at the instrument. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached for it. He sat down, adjusted the strings, and strummed softly. At first, the sound was weak and uneven, but as his hands grew steady, a melody filled the room. It was simple, gentle, and filled with emotion. Daniel sat quietly, listening as if the music carried him to another place. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped, and the house was alive again with the sound that once filled it every evening. When the last note faded, Mr. Harris looked at Daniel and gave a small laugh. "It has been many years since I played. Properly. My hands are slower now." "It was perfect," Daniel said sincerely. "I could feel the story inside the music." From that day forward, the guitar became part of their evenings. Sometimes Mr. Harris played short melodies, and sometimes he guided Daniel to strum a few chords. Daniel was not skilled, but he enjoyed. The challenge and the sound of shared laughter made the effort worth it. Their bond grew in other ways, too. On weekends, Daniel helped with the garden, trimming bushes and sweeping leaves while Mr. Harris watched from the porch. On cold days, they sat by the fire, drinking tea and talking about books, history, and life. There was no need for grand events or adventures. The simple acts of being together built a connection that neither of them spoke of directly, yet both understood deeply. One afternoon, as they sat by the window, Daniel asked a question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Do your children visit often?" Mr. Harris's eyes grew distant. "Not very often," he admitted. "They have families of their own now, jobs and busy lives. I hear from them sometimes, but it has been years since they came here." Daniel felt a quiet sadness. He could see how much Mr. Harris missed his family, even though he tried to hide it behind gentle smiles. "You are not alone anymore," Daniel said softly. "I am here." Those words touched Mr. Harris deeply. He looked at the boy with gratitude. "And I am grateful, Daniel. You remind me of something I thought I had lost." Though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew what had grown between them. It was not just friendship. It was something like family. One evening, Daniel's mother noticed how often he spent time at Mr. Harris's house. Curious, she asked him about it. Daniel explained everything, from the groceries to the guitar, from the old photos to the lessons about life. She listened carefully, then nodded with approval. "It is good that you help him," she said. "But I think he is also helping you. Sometimes life brings people together for a reason." Daniel thought about her words as he lay in bed that night. He realized she was right. Mr. Harris was not only receiving help, he was giving something, just as valuable in return. He was giving wisdom, comfort, and faith in the future. As winter approached, Daniel continued to visit regularly. Snow fell lightly over the white fence, covering the garden in soft layers. Inside the warm house, laughter and music replaced the silence that had once lived there. It was during one of these snowy evenings that Daniel understood something clearly. He had started by helping Mr. Harris with simple tasks, but now he was receiving something greater. The bond they shared was not built on duty, but on care. It was unspoken, yet powerful, the kind of connection that shapes both lives forever. And though Daniel could not yet see the full path ahead, he sensed that this bond was preparing him for something important, something that would change the way he looked at people, at dreams, and at life itself. Winter had settled over the town, and snowflakes drifted gently from the gray sky. Daniel walked to Mr. Harris's house, his boots leaving soft prints on the fresh snow. The air was cold, but he felt warmth inside. Today felt different. He could not explain it, but something in the house seemed more alive than usual. When he entered, Mr. Harris was sitting by the fireplace, holding a small envelope. He looked up and smiled. "Ah, Daniel, just in time," he said. "I have something to show you." Daniel's curiosity grew. He placed his bag down and moved closer. Mr. Harris handed him the envelope. It was thick, sealed with a wax stamp, and smelled faintly of old paper. "This belonged to my father," Mr. Harris said. "I found it in the attic while cleaning last week. I had never opened it. I think it is time you saw it too." Daniel carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was familiar yet old-fashioned. As he read, he realized it was a letter addressed to his own family. His heart skipped a beat. "Daniel, I have something to confess," Mr. Harris said softly. "I believe our families have been connected for a long time, longer than either of us knew." Daniel looked up, astonished. "Connected? How?" Mr. Harris took a deep breath. "Many years ago, my father worked with your grandfather. They were close friends. They shared hopes, dreams, and promises. Your family has always been part of mine, even if we did not know it." Daniel felt a rush of emotions. He thought of the groceries, the music, the stories. Suddenly, everything seemed even more meaningful. The chance meeting at the store was not random. It had roots in a shared past, stretching across generations. "This letter explains everything," Mr. Harris continued. "Your grandfather wanted to make sure our families stayed close, even if time and distance separated us. He wrote about loyalty, kindness, and helping one another. I never knew until now that the boy who helped me at the store was part of this connection." Daniel looked at the envelope again, tracing the handwriting with his fingers. He felt a sense of destiny, as if life had brought him here for a reason greater than carrying groceries. "I cannot believe it," Daniel whispered. "All this time we were connected and I had no idea." Mr. Harris nodded. "It is true. Life has a way of bringing people together when they need each other most. Perhaps your visits were meant to remind me of family and to remind you of what matters in life." Daniel felt a wave of gratitude and respect. He had grown close to Mr. Harris, but knowing that their connection had roots in the past made it even stronger. "That is why I want you to understand something important," Mr. Harris said, leaning closer. "Life is not only about what we do for ourselves. It is about the bonds we create, the people we help, and the love we share. You have shown me kindness, Daniel, and that kindness carries on the promise our families made long ago." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He realized that this was more than friendship. It was family, and it had always been waiting for him to discover it. To celebrate their new understanding, Mr. Harris suggested they go through more old letters and photographs together. They spent hours reading messages between fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, friends and neighbors. Each letter revealed a part of the past, and Daniel began to see his own family in a new light. "You see, Daniel," Mr. Harris said, holding a photograph of two young men shaking hands. "These men worked together, faced challenges, and promised to care for one another. That promise carried through the years. It reached you, even if you did not know it." Daniel smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart. "I never imagined that helping you would be part of something so big. It is often the small acts that matter most," Mr. Harris replied. "Carrying groceries, listening, sharing stories. These are not small to the heart. They are the moments that build connections, the ones that last forever." As the evening grew darker, Daniel noticed how peaceful the house felt. The fire crackled, and the shadows danced on the walls. It was a quiet peace, the kind that comes from knowing you belong somewhere. "I want you to know something else," Mr. Harris said, his voice softer now. "You are part of my family, Daniel, not because of blood alone, but because of heart. You care, you listen, and you give. That is what makes you family." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He had always wanted to belong, to feel important, and now he understood that he did. Not only to Mr. Harris, but also to the history that connected their families across time. "I promise I will always visit," Daniel said, holding Mr. Harris's hand gently. "I will always be here. And I will be here for you too," Mr. Harris said with a smile. "No matter what comes, we have each other now. That is what matters." The night ended with them sitting quietly, looking through the letters one last time. Daniel realized that he had not only learned about the past, but he had also discovered how to live in the present. Life was about care, respect, and connection. And sometimes, destiny had a way of showing us the people who mattered most. As Daniel walked home in the snowy evening, he felt a deep sense of purpose. The friendship, the music, the lessons, and now the hidden family connection, all of it had shaped him. He knew that he would carry these memories and lessons for the rest of his life. For Mr. Harris, the discovery of the hidden bond brought joy and closure. The house felt warmer, the music sweeter, and the silence less lonely. He had gained not only a friend, but a family member, someone who would continue the legacy of care and connection that had begun long ago. Daniel and Mr. Harris had found more than companionship. They had discovered history, love, and a promise kept across generations. The unspoken bond had finally been revealed, and it filled both their hearts with hope, gratitude, and the knowledge that life was always richer when shared with others. Spring arrived, bringing a gentle warmth to the town. Flowers bloomed in the gardens, and birds filled the air with songs that reminded Daniel and Mr. Harris of new beginnings. Their bond had grown stronger over the months, and both felt that life had taken a brighter turn. Daniel walked to Mr. Harris's house carrying a small bag of groceries, as he had done countless times before. Today, however, he felt a sense of excitement. Something inside him told him that this visit would be special. When he entered the house, Mr. Harris was sitting at the table with a cup of tea and a photograph in his hands. The image showed two young men standing side by side smiling. Daniel recognized one as Mr. Harris's father. The other was his own grandfather. "These two men changed our lives more than we realize," Mr. Harris said softly, placing the photograph down. "Their friendship, their promise, and their care for one another created the connection that brought us together." Daniel nodded, feeling a deep respect for the past. "It is amazing to think that we are part of something bigger than ourselves," he said. "I feel lucky to know you." "And I feel lucky to have you here," Mr. Harris replied, his eyes shining. "You have brought joy, laughter, and life back into this house. You have reminded me what it means to care, to share, and to be part of a family." That afternoon, they decided to work together in the garden. The soil had been dry over the winter, and weeds had begun to grow. Daniel dug while Mr. Harris pulled the weeds and planted new seeds. Their hands worked together naturally, and their conversation flowed easily. Daniel asked questions about the plants, about the way Mr. Harris's father had tended the garden years ago, and about the stories behind each flower. Mr. Harris answered with patience, recalling memories that brought smiles to both their faces. "Life is like this garden," Mr. Harris said, pausing to plant a small flower. "If we care for it, water it, and remove the weeds, it grows beautifully. But if we ignore it, it withers. People are the same. They need care, attention, and love to grow." Daniel thought about those words carefully. He realized that helping Mr. Harris was like tending a garden. Every visit, every shared story, and every moment spent together helped both of them grow as the sun began to set. The sky turned a soft pink and gold. Daniel and Mr. Harris stood back to look at the garden. The flowers were small but vibrant, a symbol of their shared efforts and care. "It looks wonderful," Daniel said, feeling proud. "I never imagined I could help make something so beautiful." Mr. Harris smiled. And you have. But the most beautiful part is not the flowers. It is the bond we have built, the love we share, and the memories we create. That evening, they sat by the fireplace with cups of tea. Daniel brought out his sketchbook and showed Mr. Harris the new designs he had drawn. Inspired by their conversations and the stories of their families, Daniel had created sketches of a community center, a place for neighbors to gather, share stories, and celebrate life together. "This is wonderful, Daniel," Mr. Harris said, examining the drawings. "You have taken what you have learned and turned it into something meaningful for others. This is a gift that will last long after we are gone." Daniel felt a sense of pride and purpose. He realized that his visits, which had begun as a simple act of kindness, had grown into something much greater. He was learning to leave a mark on the world, just like the men in the photograph had done. Over the following weeks, Daniel continued to visit Mr. Harris, helping him with small tasks around the house and sharing stories of school and friends. Mr. Harris, in turn, taught Daniel about history, music, and life. Their time together became a rhythm, steady and comforting, like the beat of a drum. One afternoon, Mr. Harris suggested they invite neighbors and friends to the house for a small gathering. Daniel helped prepare the invitations, and soon the house was filled with laughter, conversation, and the scent of fresh flowers. People came to hear stories, play music, and enjoy the company of others. Daniel noticed how happy Mr. Harris looked. The house that had once been quiet and lonely was now alive with warmth and joy. It was as if every story, every song, and every smile had returned life to the walls that had held memories for so many years. During the gathering, Mr. Harris took Daniel aside and said, "Do you see, Daniel? Life is not just about the past or the future. It is about what we do today, the love we share, and the moments we create. You have brought all of that into my life, and I am grateful beyond words." Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of the journey they had shared. "And you have taught me so much," he replied. "About family, kindness, and caring for others. I will never forget this." As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Daniel looked around the house. He saw smiles, heard laughter, and felt the warmth of connection. He realized that the simple act of helping someone had grown into a life-changing journey. That night, Daniel walked home under the starry sky. The cool breeze brushed against his face, and he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He understood now that life's true meaning came from helping others, building connections, and cherishing the moments shared with those we care about. Mr. Harris, sitting by the fireplace alone after the gathering, held a cup of tea and looked at the photograph of the two young men once more. He smiled softly. The promise of the past had been fulfilled, and he had found not only friendship but family in Daniel. Their bond, built on kindness, care, and shared stories, would last a lifetime. It was a reminder that life, no matter how ordinary it seemed, could be extraordinary when hearts were open and love was shared. And so, Daniel and Mr. Harris continued their journey together, teaching each other, learning from the past, and creating a future filled with hope, laughter, and the unbreakable connection of chosen family. Life had changed forever for both of them, and they knew that no matter what happened, they would always be there for one another. The story ended not with a grand event, but with the quiet, powerful truth that kindness, care, and connection could transform lives in ways no one could imagine.